Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Wolfe. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Global Spaceport Alliance. Welcome. I'm very glad to see you today. I'm glad you're able to join us for this webinar entitled Ocean Launch, Ocean-Based Spaceports, and Future Mobile Access to Orbit. We've got a great program today, and we've got an incredible panel set up. But before we get into that, I just want to make a few announcements about some upcoming activities. First off, I do want to thank our sponsors, RSNH, Merrick and Company, BRPH, Parsons, Michael Baker, ITA, HDR, and MITRE Corporation. I don't know if we're going to be showing some slides on those things, but I'll just keep going. We have the 11th edition of the GSA Spaceport Summit coming up in January 27th. I encourage you all to plan to be there. The registration is now open. It will be a phenomenal event. Last year, we had over 300 people show up. It's going to be even greater this year, and you won't want to miss this. And so look for that. This year's theme will be Spaceports, Catalyst for Economic Growth. The GSA Summit, of course, is part of the Commercial Space Week, which includes space mobility and Spacecom. And as members, you not only get you get discounts to those events as well. So certainly plan to be there. Look forward to seeing you. Our next webinar will be on space standards. Please look for, we're wrapping that up in terms of planning. Look forward to details and registration information on that. Look forward to seeing you there. And then, of course, I finally want to invite everyone on this call who's not already a GSA member to please consider joining. If you are at all involved in the spaceport ecosystem globally, in one way or another, you should be a member of GSA. So with that, let's move right into our incredible panel and discussion today. So when we think of launch, we don't readily think about what it means for our rockets to be flying over the ocean or flying from the ocean. So we thought it would be very interesting with some of our members to really dig into some of these questions that everyone who's launching rockets needs to consider. So let me just jump right in and introduce our panel and get into the conversation. We have with us Tom Marotta, who is the founder of the Spaceport Company. He happens to be an old friend of mine, so glad to see you again, Tom. Michael Anderson is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Seagate. We have Kei Shimada, chief business officer at Innovation Space Carriers, Inc., and Al Wilson, associate director of NLA International. So welcome you all to this call, and we're going to get right into this conversation. And I thought the way we would start was by asking all of you a broad question, and then at the same time give you an opportunity to say a little bit about what your company is all about, and take a few minutes to do that. So here's the question: what are the critical issues relating to launching rockets into space over the ocean or from the ocean, in your opinion? So just a big, broad question, giving an opportunity to get our feet wet in this conversation. And so let's start with Tom.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for having me here, having us all here, and thank you everybody for tuning in. It's always great to reconnect with you, Steve, and reconnect with the spaceport community here. So outstanding to see the growth. I'll introduce the Spaceport Company very briefly for those who don't know. What we do at the Spaceport Company is we launch rockets at sea. My background, very briefly, I'm trained as a city planner. I was a foreign service officer, served overseas for 6 years, worked at the FAA for 5 years, and then very briefly worked for a rocket company where I lived the pain of trying to find cost-effective, reliable, and predictable launch pad access. So we started the Spaceport Company to build more launch pads, to improve the capacity for launching regularly and cost-effectively and predictably. And the cheapest, fastest way we found to do that is actually to go out to sea. We've conducted 5 launches to date. We own a mobile launch pad ship that's capable of small suborbital sounding rockets and target rockets and missile tests. And we have 2 more operations on the books that'll be coming up in the next 6 months or so. Um, we have not yet started doing orbital operations. We're excited to partner with others and learn how to scale that. Um, and Steve, to your question, I think I'll kind of rephrase your question and say, why are we going out to sea? In the United States, we have something like 14 FAA licensed spaceports. Many of them have never done any launches. Many would say, hey, we have the capacity to launch from land. Let's launch from land. Well, it is very challenging to get regulatory approval to launch from a spaceport. It is easy to get approval, or relatively easy to get approval to become a spaceport. Then to actually conduct launches from that spaceport is a secondary process. And the reason is rockets are still very risky. These are volatile vehicles that occasionally explode. And so we want to make sure, at least in the United States and in most areas of the world, that those operations are very far away from anybody that can be hurt from them.
Right.
And so going out to sea is a way to provide distance from what are relatively risky operations from the people and the property and the environment on land. Um, the
One
United
thing
States
that,
have the capability to do that. Other countries are doing it, and we're trying to bring it back.
uh, and thanks, Tom. And we're actually going to dig more into that aspect of of the question of why sea launch as we progress. But right now, let me move on to Michael Anderson. Michael,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts and what's
Thanks,
going
Steve.
on? Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think the question is actually a really great one for introducing our company as well. So I'll try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because it's actually the same question we asked ourselves and then went out and asked the market before we even founded our company. And the meta answer, why aren't we launching at sea already? We found a fundamental disconnect between this emerging aerospace sector and the new space companies that are filling it and the legacy maritime sector. So we asked launch companies, have you thought about launching at sea? Why haven't you? And we really got 2 general responses. And one was yes, but the maritime technical requirements, we started dabbling, we took a look at them. They're really outside of our wheelhouse. We stood it down. We didn't want it to become a distraction for what we're doing. The other answer was yes, but we talked to what was the name of that maritime company? Anyway, they didn't get back to us. They didn't take us seriously. So ultimately, we stood down, and it wasn't something we decided to take forward. And so the answer we derived from that was, look, launch is hard enough already. And then the specialized capabilities needed to make it viable from a marine environment are really immense and daunting. And at the end of the day, the US maritime industry just hasn't paid enough attention to this space and its needs. So coming back to our company, we founded Seagate Space to be the maritime partner for the space industry. And so we're building a specialized maritime operation and the assets to support offshore launch, but we're also looking at how we can support recovery at sea, transportation of rocket components at sea, and perhaps other opportunities as well. I know we're the new kids on the block in this discussion. That's all good. But our team brings over 100 years of combined maritime experience. That's across technical design, construction, operations, regulatory, finance, every job you could have in a commercial maritime company, someone on our team has done that job. And what we all believe is that the space sector is a really important one for maritime to support. We see immense potential in moving complex launch operations offshore. Other industries have benefited from it. We're now developing purpose-built designs to integrate both new and already proven technologies into our first platform. And we're currently kicking off a process with class on approval and principle to allow us to bring it to market. And I'll close up. I'll just say, let's acknowledge today, space is the maritime partner for space. SpaceX has really led the way. They have an impressive offshore recovery operation. As an early mover, you have to build your own solutions. But what we see is as this industry matures, there's room for specialized third-party providers. And when it comes to offshore launch and all things maritime, that's the role that we're filling with Seagate Space.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So if Kay is here, Kei Shimada. I will go to you. Is Kei here? Hey, there he is. Okay.
Yes,
Um,
Steve. Yes.
yeah, so yeah, the question is again over, what are the issues if you're flying over the ocean, or launching from it? And I guess it's up to you to answer the question. Is it the why would we want to launch from the ocean? I'll leave it to you to answer both sides of that if you'd like. Okay, let's go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for inviting me to this amazing panel. And hi, everyone. My name is Kay. I am the Chief Business Officer of Innovative Space Carrier. I think I'm the only one on the launcher side today, so sitting in the panel. So we're building reusable rockets, and our mission is to make space accessible to everyone by 2040. Our ultimate goal is to build a single stage to orbit, sort of like a space shuttle without the big orange booster, for those of you who've seen the space shuttle back in the day. So from our point of view, sea launch is extremely interesting and exciting, especially coming from Asia, where we're stationed. We're basically a Japanese company. Um, well, if you take a look at Asia, for example, Southeast Asia and Japan, we're basically island countries where we don't have that much land mass in comparison to the States or even Europe, or other continents. So land issues always become a very big issue when we try to launch. The other thing, if we look at, for example, launch in Japan, there's five um, spaceports in Japan, but each and every spaceport is very hard to access. On average, from Tokyo, it would take about like 6 hours to go to get to each spaceport. And as a launcher, customers are everything. We need visibility, we need traction, we need people to understand that space is the next destination for them eventually. So for us, the C option actually poses a very viable option where we see sea launch as sort of like a moving spaceport. So if you can't get to a spaceport easily, why can't the spaceport come to you kind of approach? So I'd like thinking out of the box. I'm probably one of the very few people here who have had a consultant hat, a engineer hat. Plus, I was also in the creative aid industry, so I love solving complex problems in a very creative way. So that's me.
Okay, okay, and we're going to hear more about his initiative as well. Very, very exciting. Let's hear from Al Wilson with NLA International. And what's your view on this? I think you're a little bit different even from most of the panelists. So let's hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Steve, and hi to everyone on the call from the United Kingdom. I'm different because I'm in the United Kingdom, perhaps, but the company is slightly different. First of all, to introduce myself, I'm a consultant director with a company called NLA International. But in terms of my professional background and career, I spent 30 years in the British Royal Navy as an officer commanding ships. So I know the maritime environment very well because I spent the best part of my adult life in it. And consequently, that background I have taken into NLA International for the work that we do across the maritime domain. So NLA International is a blue economy company. And by that, I mean anything that is derived commercially from the maritime environment, from maritime domain awareness to environmental to maritime security. And the range of activity that we are involved with is wide. Although we're a UK company, we have a global reach, hence international in the name. And to give you an example, two projects that I'm involved with at the moment. One is in the Galapagos Islands, providing security management support to a not-for-profit organization that has been involved in the creation of a new marine reserve between Galapagos and Costa Rica. And the other project that I'm involved with is supporting a UK spaceport called the Saxford UK Spaceport, which is situated in the Shetland Islands in the very northmost tip of the UK. And I can talk about that more in detail because I have just undertaken a navigational risk assessment for them as part of their regulatory framework and their marine license application. So that's my involvement with the space industry. Perhaps not as mature as other panelists, but we NLAI are very excited about the work we're doing in support of a small but growing UK commercial space industry. And there is a great aspiration to do more, and we want to be involved in that journey. In terms of the question about the sort of critical issues and the challenges related to space operations from sea, I mean, there are positives and there are challenges. The fact is that 80% of the Earth's surface is ocean. Therefore, the opportunities are huge. The opportunities to choose where you are going to launch based on the environment around you must be very attractive for space launch operators. I have seen the regulatory challenges associated with launching from a UK spaceport, and we certainly take lessons from a UK perspective from more mature commercial space operations globally and apply these. But you are operating in a harsh environment, which is the seas and the oceans. So that in itself is going to create challenges, and we're going to talk a little bit more about weather later on. The advantage of being mobile and launching from sea as opposed to a fixed place on land, and Tom touched on this, I have found with working in the UK space industry, it's not very well known, both by those who are on land and those in the maritime environment. There's a bit of cultural obstruction. People are sensitive to change, and with the UK not having launched an orbital rocket from a fixed position on the UK mainland yet, people are still unsure about it. What does it mean to them? What risks are associated with it? Take that to sea, and you reduce that cultural resistance. The maritime community itself are a unique group of people, and we sort of operate agnostic to what's going on quite often on land. And what we have found is that there is concern about launching from a land base, even though it's in a remote location in the north of the UK, because does it impact on their commercial operations, whether it is local or regional or international fishing fleets, whether it is the fixed offshore and renewable energy infrastructure off the coast, or whether it is recreational mariners who don't understand what this might impact on their use of the ocean. So that's another factor that you can take out if you go to a sort of mobile ocean-based launch. And then the regulatory process is going to be simpler because not very simple, but what I have found from a UK perspective is we're still learning about the regulatory requirements. Therefore, we err on the side of caution. There are a number of regulatory hoops that we have to jump through to gain the licenses to launch from launch pad operation, marine licenses, environmental. Some of them will not go away, but certainly being at sea and having that flexibility to do it in international waters, out of countries, territorial waters, or exclusive economic zone has got to be advantageous to the launch operator. I've spoken quite a lot. I'll pause there so that we can move on.
Good. No, it's a wonderful start. You've all really teed up this conversation tremendously and also already offered quite a bit of content for us. I do want to ask or let the audience know that we are going to be taking questions from the audience. So please take the time, ask some questions, put them in a chat field. And as we move along, we'll be monitoring those and asking our panel your questions as we go along. Al, just listening to you, I can't. I'm already going to flip the script here a little bit. I'm going to turn right back to you. I was very keen to hear. Maybe you could share more about the assessment and research projects that you're currently undergoing for Saxiford. I think our other spaceports on the call would be very interested in that experience. But you could take a couple of minutes to expand on what that process has been like and what you found out.
Yeah. So just for a bit of context, the part of the UK regulatory process, which closely resembles other international regulatory processes, part of that process is a marine license. So the spaceport has got to provide evidence to the regulatory and authority that when they launch a orbital or a suborbital rocket from their launch pad over the sea, they can do it fully understanding the environment over which they're launching and perhaps dropping parts of the rocket into, and can ensure that the risk associated with the maritime community is as low as reasonably practicable, ALARP, as we call it. So that is my involvement with this. And as part of that marine license application, you have to undertake a navigational risk assessment. And I have a strong background in maritime domain awareness and maritime risk. So that is why I am the one that leads this work for NLA International. And basically, we're all probably quite familiar with risk assessment processes, but understanding the context is hugely important. So, where are you launching, both in UK waters and international? What are you launching over? What does the maritime environment look like in terms of types, concentrations, volumes, and patterns of maritime activity, both shipping and fixed infrastructure? There's quite a lot of oil and gas fields off the northeast of Scotland and off the coast of Norway, and there are some mobile platforms as well. And there's a growing renewable energy infrastructure, namely wind farms that are appearing along the coast of Norway and of the UK, and they have got to be considered. Once you understand that environment, then you apply the layer of spaceport operations. So how is the introduction of spaceport operations going to affect that community? And then you go through a risk process, which is both quantitative and qualitative. So it's quantitative in how many vessels are in the area over which you are launching rockets, and therefore per square nautical mile, what is the risk associated with something either purposely being jettisoned from the rocket or the rocket failing and landing on the water? What is the risk to mariners? Because if you take an area that I'm analyzing, which is a couple of 100,000 square nautical miles, the number of vessels in that area are actually quite low in comparison, probably 0.0001 per square nautical mile. However, if you take just one aspect of the maritime community, and that is the pelagic fishing fleets, they are the fishing fleets that chase the mackerel herring in the North Atlantic and the Nordic Sea, so north of Shetland and between Greenland and Norway. They come at certain times of the year, but they come in large numbers, and they're mainly Russian, British, Danish, and Norwegian. And they'll consecrate. They follow the fishing fleet. So you might have 100 vessels in a 10 square kilometer box. Now, if you're launching a rocket and you're jettisoning your stages or your fairing into that area, they're clearly the risk is huge. And then my process has to introduce control measures so that we can warn mariners of the danger, and we can reduce the risks associated with that launch operations to satisfy the regulator that we have done everything we can to ensure safe launch operations.
Okay, great. Thanks, Al. That is quite informative, and I want to pull in Tom. I mean, what kind of issues are you facing? I mean, it's just sort of whether it's fisheries and so forth. I mean, now you're ocean-based, so you're not dealing with coastal issues, but you're still dealing with the same. How are you addressing the kinds of issues that Al is talking about?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, because we are out there actually operationally conducting operations. We're going out there and doing these operations and engaging with regulators I think the first thing to say is that our industry, the aerospace industry, has procedures to do this. I think specifically, you think of Cape Canaveral, there are very large rockets, both launching and landing on a regular basis in some of the busiest airspace and the busiest sea space in the world. Port Canaveral is the busiest cruise port in the world, and Florida airspace is some of the busiest airspace in the world. And the FAA and the Space Force and all of the local communities, the fishing community, there's a lot of recreational fishermen. They figured it out, right? And so the challenge that the Spaceport Company is seeing is replicating or educating regulatory stakeholders in other areas of the world to show them to say, hey, yes, this is a risky activity, but we have procedures. We've learned the lessons. We know how to do this safely. It's being done almost every day down in Florida out of Cape Canaveral. Let's choose the best lessons learned from that area of the world and other areas of the world where they're launching regularly and apply them in the manner that Al mentioned, doing a very sober and detailed analysis, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Mhm.
And to educate these other stakeholders in other parts of the world and say, we can do this safely. The ocean, there's a lot of ships out there, but it's a very big place, and we can mitigate the risk of to both maritime and to the environment.
So
If I could just come in support of Tom there, Steve.
indeed, yeah.
Tom makes a really good point about the activity around the Florida area. Most of the maritime activity is up to 50, 100 miles off the coast. It's coastal traffic, it's leisure traffic, it's the cruise ships that don't necessarily
Same
venture
with
far
most of the air
offshore.
traffic.
Yeah. So the ability to pick and choose where you want to launch from based on a very quiet ocean and a very quiet airspace is hugely advantageous to the space flight launch operator.
And I'll just quickly add, one of the great things about launching from a mobile sea-based launch pad is if you can move, right? If you're in a spot where, for whatever reason, the regulators say it's just too risky, we can't let you launch from here. Great, we can move 50 miles or 100 miles in another direction and start over. So let's not forget, this is the potential to solve that problem, which is unique.
All right, I want to go to the other side of the planet now, with Japan and Kay. Maybe you can add some. Would you like to add some color to this, some content to this in terms of the issues that you see that might be similar and maybe a little different from your vantage point?
Absolutely. Well, I think Al, made a very good point about, regulatory issues and also maritime issues. It's the same, Japan probably has access to the most different kind of fish. That's why our sushi is nice, and renowned, I would say. We also have, I think, the third or fourth longest coastal line. Although we are very small, we are as long as Oslo to the heel of Italy. So that's how we are longs north and south. But yes, I guess
Oop, you just put yourself on mute.
sorry about that. I didn't have my hands on it, but yeah. But yeah, so if we take, for example, like a weather or natural phenomenon, we are hit on average about I would say 10 to a dozen typhoons per year. And when it becomes like the typhoon season, of course, it's not viable for launch. So if we could, for example, shift our spaceport up to Hokkaido, where the hurricanes don't come up to, where the typhoons don't come up to, we could still continue to launch. But the other thing is, I talked about access to spaceports. The thing is, getting around in Japan, we have the bullet train, and our commute system does work clockwise, and it's very reliable. But then again, from our standpoint as a launcher, we need more people seeing launches and having them understand that access to space is much more closer than they feel. So, it's also a very big business opportunity as well. So, for example, you could do sea launches off the coast of wherever. So the municipal governments can basically call on you to do launches off of your shore. So that kind of business opportunity is something that we are thinking about. Again, we're not going to build a spaceport, but if we look at, for example, Japan and Southeast Asia in total, we're still much behind Europe and, of course, the US. We don't have that many spaceports, but all these countries, including ourselves in Southeast Asia, we're building satellites. Japan, of course, has its own H-2A and H-3 rockets, but access to space is becoming a national security issue. And Southeast Asia is also looking into how they can launch from their countries, and oceans should be a viable solution, should be an option as well. So we're thinking. So we have this working group called the New Spaceport Working Group that consists of 16 mostly stock listed companies, ranging from real estate to construction to maritime, plus one university on board. We've been working on a ocean-based, businessly viable solution, a modular solution, which we're coming up with a white paper very, very soon to maybe hand out to people. But if we can make a license model, it would help Asia understand what options they have, and it would also bring in a new industry perspective as well. Because if we're building something more massive than just a launch pad on sea, and more of like a airport on sea, then we're building a new economy, which at our company we call it the Space Economy 2.0 opportunity. So
I think,
yeah, so
okay, if I
there's a lot
may,
of
I think we want to hear more details about that, and I have that down here. So why don't we? So let's come back to that. But so thank you for that perspective. And I think you just answered the question that was just posted a minute ago about Malaysia and their potential for spaceports. Um, let's talk about weather for a minute. I want to pull Michael back in here. So, what are the weather and sea state monitoring issues? I mean, have we advanced over in recent years? Is this how do you look at this, and what are the related considerations?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Steve, and one where there's this feedback loop even between our ability to monitor some of the conditions that are necessary for launch at sea and informative of launch at sea, and those have already been touched on, and actually what's being built in space. So companies like Starlink and what SpaceX is doing with Starlink, companies like Planet, other Earth observation companies are actually unlocking more real-time information that we can then, as operators, apply to not just leverage historical data, but leverage real-time information around weather patterns, sea states, dynamic observation of coastal infrastructure as well for nearshore launch. All of that's actually being enabled by integration between sensor technology as well as satellite technology that's being put in place. So I just find it compelling that the more we're able to do that, the more we're able to put satellites in space that can monitor weather patterns and the like, the more we're actually able to streamline and facilitate launch at sea. And I won't say that weather patterns or some of that is my particular specialty, but what I will say is that the maritime industry as a whole has already become a substantial user of a lot of that information. And some of the folks in our company, one of the responsibilities they had was installing Starlink on all of the vessels at our previous maritime company. And that's just unlocked such a great amount of bandwidth and uptime that we're able to pull data off of maritime infrastructure and leverage it in real time to improve operations. So when you're talking about a complex operation like sea launch, and I really think we should get into, we're talking about a lot of, I think, really valid conceptual points as to why sea launch makes sense. We can move, we can get to different locations. It's all well and good. It's all great. The question I think we got to go back to is the one we started with, which is, Why is it not being done more often? And I do think that the advancements in some of these ancillary areas are helpful, but I think there's some fundamental challenges with the core maritime infrastructure that we really need to take a closer look at if we want this to become ubiquitous.
Great. I imagine Al Wilson, you have a comment, if you could make a brief comment about the ocean weather domain and monitoring issues about having to do with land launching as well, and what the impact is, and what the evolution of that knowledge gathering has been over the years.
Yeah, certainly, Steve. And just to endorse what Michael's just said about technology and how it's evolved to really benefit maritime. The ocean is a harsh environment, and of course, if you're out there mid-ocean with a vessel that you're launching rockets from, the weather might be poor, but you still got to be out there. Whereas in a land-based site, I guess you just you batten down the hatches and you wait. You don't necessarily have that option, but there is technologies within the maritime environment that are really dealing with that. So there's a huge investment and an evolution of maritime autonomy at the moment. USVs, uncrewed surface vessels, UUVs, uncrewed underwater vehicles. And I think autonomy is going to play a huge part of the future of ocean-based launch operations for the space industry. So that's going to be of huge benefit, because as you reduce the humans in the loop, they'll be on the loop, but not in the loop, then the limitations for the activity that you can undertake are reduced. So that is definitely something that is the technology is increasing quickly, and we are, from a UK perspective, starting to harness the opportunity of maritime autonomy from a maritime security, maritime domain awareness, defence, and commercial perspective. In terms of
Now, on that autonomy topic, I'll even jump back in and back you. And I know you're certainly, I'm sure, familiar with all the systems that are already out there that enable dynamic position keeping, that enable, let's call it quasi autonomy. Those systems are readily available. We can leverage them for offshore launch. Our approach at Seagate Space is not to pursue full autonomy, right? That's just going to, I think, delay our ability to deliver what we're really going after here, which is launch at sea. Ultimately, full autonomy, I believe that there's the opportunity for us to have an entire launch system offshore, right? Maybe not just one launch pad, but perhaps an entire system where there's an end-to-end refurbishment and reuse of a rocket all occurring without having to go back into a port. And maritime autonomy, I think, provides a lot of that opportunity. But I think in the near term, there's solutions out there that are pretty well established that we can leverage to move faster and to serve this industry at a really critical point, in a critical crunch in access to launch infrastructure. And I don't think you're saying anything different. I just maybe wanted to put another spin on where you're going with the autonomy.
All right, and yeah, Michael and Al, if I could, let me shift the conversation again. We've only gave ourselves an hour. Maybe we should have given ourselves 2 hours. But let me shift the discussion a little bit. I want to go back to Tom. And this is about sea launch, and maybe Michael and Kay would have input as well. A question is about, are the current efforts in sea launch building upon the backs of historical efforts to launch at sea? This is not a new. It's not a new effort. We've been launching from the ocean for many decades now. It hasn't really taken off. I mean, it's only seems like now that there's a potential. So it's a two-part question. Are you building on the shoulders of past efforts, Tom? And are we reaching a point where we're going to finally see acceptance of sea launch, or is there still a lot of trepidation about that potential?
The answer is yes and yes. There is a lot of trepidation, and we are seeing slow but steady realization and acceptance of it. I'll refer back to what Al alluded to in his introduction. The sea is a punishing environment, right? I think there's a lot of folks who look at the map of the world and say the globe is 80% ocean. Let's just put a rocket on a boat and go out to sea and go do it. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's a very, very challenging environment to just begin executions, to build infrastructure, and then to continue on a cost-effective basis operations is very, very expensive. So that's understandable why there's some trepidation. However, our industry, and by I say our industry, I mean the aerospace industry writ large. I think a lot of the conversation around sea launch focuses on orbital launch. When I say our industry, I mean defense applications as well, sounding rocket research, which is a very, very small amount, but a non-trivial amount. There are lots of folks outside of the orbital launch industry that want to launch rockets on boats at sea for a lot of different reasons. Regardless, all of those stakeholders are running out of space on land. In other words, the demand for launch pads is starting to exceed supply. And we have extra supply in the United States from these inland spaceports. There's a lot of hesitation around launching inland for a lot of different reasons. And so people are starting to say maybe the least worst option is to go out to sea. And so that's taken a lot longer, that sort of educational aspect, and saying, okay, how do we balance the very real challenges of operating at sea versus the very real benefits of operating at sea? And so sea launch was, I call sea launch sort of the Apollo program of sea launching. It was sort of ahead of its time. It was built primarily for geopolitical reasons to, have this very convoluted partnership with Russian and Norwegian people, and spent lots and lots of money, lots of investment, and it was a technical success. It ultimately failed, not because of technical reasons. It had a failure and came back from it. It launched 36 times to orbit, but there were a lot of financial decisions that were made at the beginning of the program that hobbled it. They overinvested in some unique kind of large infrastructure, and then there were geopolitical challenges. So I think all of our companies listed up here are aware of sea launch at the very least, and are probably working with the sea launch folks to avoid those minefields, those pitfalls.
Great. Thanks, Tom. I
And
want
Steve, I'll just say there's a great question here from somebody about responsiveness and resiliency. I'd love to get to that at some point.
the sustainability question. Is that what you're?
I mean,
No,
while you pull that one up, Steve, I'd love to weigh in on
just very
sea launch
quickly.
as well.
Yeah,
I
good
think
one.
we have leadership from sea launch on our advisory board. And yeah, the first lesson learned is let's not put Russian and Ukrainian mariners on the same vessel and expect things to go super well. But no, in all seriousness, I think sea launch had the right idea. Technology today on the maritime side, and some of that technology is what we're developing, allows us to reduce the size of that heavy infrastructure that they had to invest in and match what's happening on the aerospace side, where we're talking about smaller payloads, smaller launch systems. And I think that'll get into some of this responsive and mobile launch topic. But I'll say this, I think our goal is not to, as you said, Tom, make sea launch the least worst option. Our goal is to develop technology that ultimately takes advantages, maximizes them, and mitigates some of the challenges associated with launching at sea, and actually puts offshore launch on par, different, but on par with the opportunities to launch from coastal sites. So I think it'll be a different option. It'll be a very option where some will prefer it versus others. But certainly we want to set the bar higher than least worst with regards to how we position the ultimate offshore launch system that our companies want to build.
Well, it's very relevant. Thank you for that. Actually, in this vein, I want to expand this conversation because I want to bring in Kai back in here, because the GSA has talked quite a bit about spaceports as being the economic hub for economic development, and I think his vision for not only launch, but how do we create a total economy around that sea launch platform and related platforms. And this sort of gets to what is the future of maybe of sea launch, because it's more than just rockets. And I think folks have mentioned this a couple of times in different ways in this conversation. We are getting close. We're about 15 minutes left. But anyway, I did want to just time check you there. But Kay, this is a good opportunity for you to share a little bit more about your concept, your vision for Sirius Technologies.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Well, the thing is, in a nutshell, I think, wherever you launch, spaceports needs to be attractive, right? It needs to attract people. It needs to attract interest. It needs to attract media. It needs to be sort of like at the center of attention. And in Japan, the spaceports are just so far away in isolated areas, of course, for obvious reasons. But if we are going to do ocean launches, they should be as attractive as airports. So if you look at airports these days, right, people go to airports for a variety of reasons. The majority, they need to hop on a plane or, get off a plane and get to where they go. So airports, of course, satisfy that option. But for other reasons, right? For example, in Japan, we have Haneda and Narita. Narita is out there, so I would talk about Haneda. It's very close to the city, and you could get there. There's a lot of restaurants. There's a lot of shopping. There's a big shopping mall there. Parents will take their children to see planes take off, and there might be a rare, plane in the neighborhood. They would basically just hop over to the airport to, kill time or just have fun. So I see the spaceports needing to go in that way as well. And on land, we don't have that option. For those of you who have been to Japan, you know how crowded we are and how much land we do have for that matter. So the thing is, when we think of the next generation of spaceports, especially sea launch, I want to be very, very sure that we're focusing on the economically viable options that we could basically put in or integrate from day one. So the thing is, they need to be attractive, they need to be self-sustainable, and they also can't break apart on the ocean because of the currents, right? So when we take into those considerations, um, our approach at the new spaceport working group, which one of my team members is running, right? We're thinking about a modular system of, for example, like 5 different modules that will come together when it forms an island so that people could wander around, go shopping, stay at a hotel, and basically enjoy themselves. But a launch unit will be one module that breaks apart when there's a launch on the ocean. So the thing is, we've basically set a different business model to each module so that they could be autonomously run. For example, we have an energy unit that, of course, powers the whole island when all the modules come together. But that module, for example, if you look at Japan, you know what happened in 2011 when we had the nuclear meltdown and we had the big tsunami that caused it. Um, when we're an island country, to give help and provide um, provide help to those areas, access from the sea is actually fastest instead of going from land. For example, so this module would be dual use. So it would power the whole spaceport when it comes together. But when there's a natural disaster on any part of Japan, it could basically float over and provide energy, for example, from the ocean to land.
Mhm.
And if we have sort of like an accommodation or a hotel, basically module, right? That, of course, would provide housing for refuge and so forth. So the thing
So
is, we need to
if
be.
if I can, Kay, let's just to keep this moving a little bit.
Yep.
I, I couldn't be more fascinated by that idea. So it's sort of, and it gets the sort of vision question, right? And I think Michael, because I did want to give Michael a chance to weigh in. You sort of alluded to this earlier, Michael, that you could use at sea, you could incorporate all of the various elements of the value chain for launching at sea. I mean, do you concur with what is your vision for future launch platforms and
Yeah,
what you could do?
I think that's the long-term goal. And I mean, that's what we've seen with other industries, right? Oil and gas, for example, offshore drilling is on par. It's different, but on par with what we're doing with energy sourcing inland. So ultimately, yeah, I think that there's an opportunity if we can solve, and a lot of great questions in the chat, I'll just say, around how we solve some of the immediate challenges related to stability, related to the logistics associated with a sea launch complex, related to the mobility aspect of utilizing a platform that can be moved efficiently and still provide the effectiveness as a launch site. Really great questions that I think we should touch on at some point. But I think we need to solve that for the N of one, for the single platform operating a single rocket, coming in and out of a port. That's the first design challenge. It's been solved, but not in a resilient way, right? Sea Launch solved it for a spell, but we've since lost that capability. So I think solving that is the immediate challenge, and then we build from there. I do like the idea of a broader, potentially a broader offshore infrastructure play around launch at kind of the core. And I think ultimately that's going to require some enhancements in rocket technology as well, right? To make it safe for people to be in that degree of proximity, even though it is maybe a mobile, breakable system. One really great question, Steve, and maybe I can just point you to it, is the extent to which extent to which rocket providers will need to modify their systems in order to launch effectively offshore. And I think our goal is to develop a maritime system that minimizes the need to build custom rocket vehicles or launch infrastructure when launching offshore. So our goal, working with our customers and collaborators, is to say, what can we build from a platform perspective that will minimize the amount of changes that you need to make to your standard loadout? So that's our strategy. At least I could see an alternative strategy that has a very custom, approach to building the rocket. I just thought that was a really great question, and I wanted to point to, we are innovating on the maritime side to minimize the need to change the rocket system, so that at least in the short term, the infrastructure needed from a land-based perspective and for offshore launch can retain compatibility. And we're seeing some of our customers go in that direction anyway with their mobile launch systems. So I think it's potentially a promising thread.
Yeah, no, great. If you look at the questions, Tom, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on that. I do have a question from Rich Lamb. Have any current launch providers or launch providers developed the space launch vehicle for near future indicated their interest in partnering on sea launch with sea launch companies? So, and I think maybe the related question here is, Tom, I know that you're looking at multiple. You're providing a launch pad, right? So you're somewhat agnostic as to the provider. So, or maybe you could speak to that. Who's launching on the sea launch? Is it the launcher that has their own dedicated launch pad, or can we swap out launch systems?
So there's no technical reason we couldn't do multi-user pads, but the customer so far they don't seem interested. They like to have their own exclusive pads. So we do what the customer wants to do. As far as small orbital launch, that market is still emerging. There's been a lot of consolidation in the orbital launch industry with SpaceX, and so I think small orbital launch from ships, we're still looking for, the industry writ large is looking for that kind of anchor tenant. That said, the Spaceport Company is in contact with all the major launch providers. We have received inbound inquiries from all of them because any launch company, orbital launch company that has a backlog is looking for not only just additional launch pads anywhere in the world, and we see that with public pronouncements about spaceports overseas, despite the export control challenges, spaceports in various parts of the world. I mean, orbital launch companies are throwing all the spaghetti at the wall, including looking at sea launch. I think that, in order to serve their companies. And so, we look forward to having those orbital launch companies plant the flag and go out. It's tough to be the first. There's still a lot of hesitation around the sea launch experience in the late 90s, but we're seeing massive interest from other stakeholders as well. And so, I encourage this group to think outside of just orbital launch. We're seeing, SpaceX operates a fleet of drone ships for reentry. Rocket Lab has announced that they're chartering a barge to do drone ship recovery. We're seeing a proliferation of reentry companies like Varda and others. Varda lands on land, but the Dragon capsule has been landing at sea now for over a decade. And so the aerospace industry is moving out to sea. Would I like to see it move faster? I absolutely would, but there are inherent benefits of being out at sea, and it's finding that sweet spot between lowering the costs to unlock the benefits. And to Major Chung's point there about resiliency, operating at sea offers some unique capabilities independent of cost, right? So many operators in the launch industry, especially orbital launch operators, having worked for an orbital launch company, cost is paramount. They are cost sensitive. But you currently can't launch a rocket from the equator, right? So going to sea is the fastest, cheapest way to do that. For example, that's one use case that sea launch unlocks.
Very good. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. And with that, with Tom, I'm going to allow that to be your closing statement. I want to offer the other three members to. I know that the chat it's exploding with questions, which is so exciting. And I know that you've all been sort of peeking into that. So I want to give each of the other three a chance to respond to one of the questions that maybe have piqued your interest in the chat field. I know, Mike, you've already referenced one. Why don't I start with you? See if you want to provide additional thoughts on any questions that come up as a closing.
So many good questions. It's really good to see all this interest. For me, I think one of the most interesting questions is the degree to which is this going to be something that's totally reliant on government dollars and government investment, or is there a commercial play here? I think one kind of quick thought to provoke is, there's this, I think, false paradigm between cost and effectiveness or capability. And in the maritime space, often the false paradigm is realized because there are existing assets that don't have the capability, but because they exist, just happen to be lower cost for the short term. In the long term, I don't think that trade-off is one that is permanent. And if we build customized assets, we'll not only provide the capabilities needed, we'll bring the cost down. The government, I think, has a hand in initiating that and can provide several anchor customer type of throughput for an initial offshore launch platform. And Tom, to your point, that may not be for orbital missions, it may be for suborbital missions. But once we establish that and can show that customized high capability assets actually solve this challenge for the industry and bring costs down, then I think that's when there's no longer a kind of government subsidy needed. Now there's an opportunity to engage more commercially once that initial baseload and likely government tenant, so to speak, has helped us fund the first stuff. So that's my view on the government. I think it's an important actor in this equation. I don't think if we can get the equation right, I don't think that we need to be wholly reliant on government investment to make sea launch viable.
Excellent point. Now, how about Al and then Kay?
Thanks, Steve. I would just, there was a couple of points in the chat about sorry, someone's just trying to call me on my phone rather unhelpfully.
We are going over a few minutes, so just to the audience, I hope that's
I think we need another hour. So I mean,
yeah.
Easily.
I would say one of the this is all doable. You know, launch from sea is doable, and we should do it for all the right reasons. I think looking at it from a UK perspective, having been involved with the regulatory process, I think that one of the key regulatory challenges will be the classification society that certifies your vessels that are safe to go to sea and safe to operate for the purpose of which they're designed will be one of the challenges that might slow things down. And I have had experience in maritime automation autonomy in the UK. And the key point is bring the regulator with you, bring the classification society with you. They are key stakeholders, make them part of the solution, not a bar to getting to a commercial operations stage as quickly as you want to.
Okay, if we could leave it there, Alan, go ahead. Are you? Yeah, let's just leave it there. Just in the interest of time, apologize. Wonderful thought, and then Kay, I'll let you have the last word.
Oh man. Okay, you put me on the spotlight. Well, the thing is, ocean launch is a viable, a viable option, and everybody's looking at that option. I think from my standpoint, I'll just echo what Michael said. So we can't be relying on government subsidies forever. We need to basically think how we're going to make money on our own. Unless so, space won't become or expand to the extent where space becomes normal for everyone. So I think. Looking in that direction from myself and also for Asia, then doing sort of like a license model so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we're providing opportunities to construction companies to come up with these platforms will help raise awareness and also bring in new businesses, and in the end, we'll probably expand on the opportunities for a lot more companies to enter the space industry. So I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. The interest is just phenomenal. We want to keep this conversation going. Ocean launch and the ocean domain is so critical. All of you who have asked questions, please, we'll monitor these. Please reach out to us at the GSA. We do want to keep this conversation going. Maybe even build a working group around this topic. I think there's a lot to explore here. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining us and for being part of the GSA. I want to thank our panel, Tom, Kay, Michael, and Al for doing a phenomenal job. And we look forward to seeing you all in January at the GSA Summit and next time at our next webinar. So thank you all for being here and have a great day.